Welcome. In this Facebook Live, I'm going to talk about 4 healthy ways that you can deal with the pain, the emotional pain of our current reality during this quarantine. And of course, the current reality is it looks like at some point we're going to be transitioning out of that. And so, what are all the worries, the anxieties that come with the transitions? I'm Georgia Schaefer, and as a certified professional coach, I partner with people who feel frustrated and irritated. They're not making forward progress. And together I partner with them to create momentum so that they can move forward to a more happier, fulfilling life. But again, today we're talking about our emotions and how do we handle them. It's important you understand that your emotions affect everything. Your ability to deal with your emotions affects your spiritual maturity. It affects your relationships, your emotional health, affects your mental and physical being. And so it's important that we learn how to deal with it constructively, it being our feelings, our emotions. So that we can move forward and wherever we're stuck in a healthy way. So, how do you handle all your feelings? What's the first thing you do? Well, it seems simple, but it's really important, and that is you want to identify what it is you're feeling. Now, most of us think we can do that, but the reality is studies show that only about 3 of us out of 10 can accurately define or verbalize what we're feeling at any given moment. In taking out your emotional trash, I have a whole page of feeling words, and you can Google feeling words, but it's not something we automatically can identify. Sometimes it's just a whole assortment of emotions. But here's what you might be feeling right now. You might be feeling inadequate to handle all the problems and the changing uncertainty of your life. You might be feeling inadequate or feeling worthless or worried, anxiety, because many of you, sadness, grief, loss of job, loss of savings, not as much income as you once had, so loss of lifestyle, not to mention the ability to travel around. So these are emotions that we need to face and face in a healthy way. And once we identify them, we got to make sure that we don't immediately judge them. Because, for example, if I'm feeling afraid, it's easy for me to immediately say, well, you shouldn't feel that way. Trust in God, be at peace. But it's not always easy. So you identify your feeling, but then don't be critical of yourself. Don't immediately judge yourself. Rather, accept it, whatever the feeling is. And then consider, how are you going to handle it? Because during this time, when we're living in close quarters, it's amazing all the emotions that crop up in our closest relationships. And they're right there, either at the surface or right underneath the surface. So it can be especially difficult now because we can't process the emotions fast enough. So you want to identify it, you want to name it. Sometimes if these feelings are rumbling inside of me, I talk to a friend and they help me verbalize it, name it. And again, they help me make sure I'm not condemning myself, beating myself up, because we know from Romans that there is no condemnation in Jesus. So why are we condemning ourselves? And then the next thing we want to do, once we identify it, name it, without being critical of ourselves, is then we want to handle it in a proper and timely fashion. In other words, we're not letting it just seethe, we're not stewing about it, but we're dealing with it. If you've heard me or read anything I've written, you probably heard this story I'm about to tell before, but it's an important story and one I like to bring to mind because it's a perfect example of the consequences that we have to face when we don't deal with our feelings in a proper and timely fashion. And that is, I had a friend years ago. She had an engagement party for her daughter. It was in July. It was hot. They had at least 100 people there. They knew there was a picnic type setting, so they were serving food, and they realized there'd be a lot of trash. So they scheduled an extra trash pickup. The problem was Waste Management failed to do it, and a couple days later, her husband took those bags of garbage and stuck them behind their shed to the regular pickup garbage day. So that night before garbage pickup, he suddenly realized, gosh, I forgot about it. I got to go back there and get those bags. And it was dark, so he took them out. Now, I want you to remember, this is July. It was hot and humid during that time. So he took the bags out, and as he was walking back in the garage, he felt something on his hands. But it wasn't until he got under the light that he realized he had maggots crawling up his arm. Now, those maggots would not have been at that trash if it had been picked up when it should have been picked up. And he would have been saved that creepy experience. So if we don't deal with our trash, it accumulates, it stinks, it attracts unpleasant things like maggots, metaphorically. And so we can prevent that by dealing with it in a timely way. So how can we do that? Well, if you go to my Facebook posts on April 21st, I posted how do you deal with your feelings rather than ignore them or, discount them? What do you do so that you don't numb the pain? Because, see, we're really good at that. If we experience any kind of painful feeling, we can immediately push it to the side, deny that it exists, and try to go on. But the problem is it creates internal pressure. And at some point, sometime unknown in the future, we're going to say or do something we regret because it's just all going to come up to the surface. So on this Facebook post of April 21st, many women posted how they deal with their feelings in a healthy way rather than ignore them or numb them. But here's some things you can do. For example, when I get angry, one of the first things I try to do, don't always do it, is just pray to God and just ask him, Lord, why is this bothering me so much? What about this situation am I so angry with and upset with? And just ask, how do you want me to respond to it? Because part of us can react within a split second. If we don't pause, if we don't take a deep breath, we are going to immediately react rather than respond. So simply stopping and praying and saying, God, how do you want me to deal with this anger right now? What can I do with it? Sadness. Many times I just try to define, well, what are the losses I'm experiencing? What do I wish could be that no longer is? And the other thing I probably do as quickly as I try to pray is journal. Because journal is writing out your feelings, you're unloading them, you're no longer carrying the emotional weight around, and you get to look at them. What is it that's going on inside of you right now? And what is a way you can look at it differently? Sometimes it's just an issue of switching our perspective a little bit from, I can't believe they said that to me, to sensitive right now. which I know is my personality, I can be especially sensitive. And dealing with our emotions, our personality impacts it. Because as a melancholy personality, I tend to be hypersensitive. Whereas some personalities, they just move on, or some make a sarcastic remark. So there again, as I'm writing it out, it's important that I look at it, and then what am I going to do with it? Because if I'm not careful, and I'm angry or sad or whatever, I can be sarcastic. I can make this quick little comment. It's like stabbing a knife in someone and then moving on. Or I can just, if I'm really angry with them or upset or frustrated, irritated, I can just ignore them and not say anything. That is not a healthy way to deal with your feelings. Or maybe you're good at withholding the very thing someone wants, like attention, affection. These are not healthy ways of dealing with your feelings. So how can you channel those feelings in a constructive way? Sometimes what we can do is, if we're really tired, is just step back and do something to chill out. I go outside to my garden. That helps me focus on something besides my pain. Or another thing is, are we just holding on to some unrealistic expectation that we expect someone else to meet in our lives? Are we holding on to it a little too tightly? And then what about those grudges that we hold, those petty little grudges? We got to acknowledge that we've been hurt, verbalize it to yourself, but also you need to forgive, because forgiveness is a choice we make. And little petty grudges, I find a lot of times, if I can just name what I'm feeling, acknowledge how that did hurt me, then it's easier for me to move on and say, okay, I can let go of that. If it's something large, like you've been deceived by something that's really important to you, or been betrayed or lied to over and over, you can't forgive those as quickly. Many times those issues is, yes, you can make the choice to forgive, but then it's also a lot of little forgivenesses along the way. And then the third thing we want to do, so we identify our feelings without being critical of them, without judging them. We want to handle them in a proper and timely way. We're not letting them stew. We're not pushing them down and stuffing them or pushing them aside. And the third thing we want to do is take time on a regular basis for self-examination, self-reflection. I liked what Andy Stanley said. Years ago, I heard him speak at a booksellers conference, and he was talking about his children were young at the time, and every night before they went to bed, he would ask them, "What's on your heart?" Because he was teaching them to keep a pure heart. And he would ask questions like, "Is there anything you're mad about right now? Has someone said something today that hurt you? Or are you feeling jealous about something right now?" And so he was creating that consistent, regular time of self-reflection, teaching them to examine themselves at the end of the day. Are they mad about something? If we haven't learned these skills, which I know I didn't, if you're like me, when I was younger, the only kind of anger I saw was rage. And so I had no idea how to handle my disappointment, my sadness, my grief in a healthy way. I didn't have those skills. And so I had to learn them as an adult. But here's the good news. If you haven't learned those skills yet yourself, you can learn them. It's not too late. And so then the third thing we want to do is take that regular time for self-examination. What is we're feeling? And Andy says if we're feeling greedy, we need to give. If we're feeling jealous, confess how we're feeling. Go boldly to God's throne of grace. Grace, not grace. Grace. And ask his forgiveness. If we're feeling sad, how can we work through those feelings? But the fourth thing you can do to handle your emotions in a healthy way is to routinely say yes to God. Yes, I'm going to give you my mess. And here I'm talking about your emotional mess. Yes, God, I'm going to give you these messy feelings and help me to handle them. How can I manage these on a regular basis? So what do you need to say yes, Lord, to? Yes, Lord, I will express my anger constructively. I will find ways to channel it in a positive direction rather than destroying everybody that comes in my path. Or, yes, Lord, instead of, holding on to these guilty feelings, I'm going to confess them and ask you to forgive me. And what should I do so that I am not, experiencing directionless guilt, that I deal with it and I move on. And I tell myself, next time I'm going to handle it differently. Or, yes, Lord, I've been hurt, but I am going to work through to forgiving. I'm going to make the choice to forgive because I'm not going to feel like it. I rarely feel like forgiving, but I'm going to make that decision, and then I'm going to work through whatever those feelings are. I'm not going to numb them. So what do you need to say right now when it comes to the feelings that you're experiencing during the quarantine? What do you need to say, yes, Lord, I will deal with this, whatever it is, the emotions you're experiencing? Now, if you're wondering, well, how do I know if I'm really managing my emotions in a healthy way? If you have a truth teller in your life that will tell you the truth without beating you down and condemning you, you might want to ask them. Many times the people closest to us can see how we're really handling our feelings. But if you don't have somebody that's truth-telling close to you, then ask yourself this question. Are you experiencing joy and peace here and there these days? If you say, no, I'm not experiencing any joy, I don't have any peace, then I wonder, are you numbing your feelings? Getting back to that first step. Are you avoiding them? Are you finding some way of numbing the pain? And we're really, really good at this. We can get so busy. We can get distracted by movies on Netflix or a character on a TV series we love. We can comfort ourselves, emotionally feed. Somebody asked me to pray for them recently that instead of stuffing their feelings and then stuffing their face, that they would deal with them. And I thought that was pretty appropriate. So, are you numbing your feelings in 1,000 different ways? Spending time on Facebook, distracting yourself in 1,000,000 different ways? Or are you willing to face the reality of those feelings? Name them. As I said, you can go to Google, feeling words, and you can find a whole list of them. I have a whole page in taking out your emotional trash. And then deal with it in a proper fashion. Take time for self-reflection. And then finally, what do you need to say yes to about these emotions to God? Yes, God, I will. So I encourage you to do this. Why? For not only the benefit of your world, to keep your heart pure and not let these feelings pile up and create a stinking mess, but also for the benefit of those around you. So thanks for joining me today. If you have any questions, just email me at georgia@georgiaschaefer.com. But don't avoid these feelings. Deal with them, and deal with them in a constructive, healthy way.